2 Elixir. That's all it takes to flip a match. They're cheap, they're fast, and they've shaped Clash Royale's history more than any legendary ever could. These aren't just cards, they're the silent killers hiding in every deck. Let's start with a card that looks weak but controls pushes more than most win conditions. The Ice Golem. It's small, it's slow, and it barely does any damage, but don't let that fool you. Ice Golem is one of the smartest cards in the entire game. The Ice Golem is great at soaking up damage, especially from heavy hitters like Mini P.E.K.K.A. or Prince, and in the right hands, it doesn't just defend. It buys you time. Time to build a counter push, time to recover your elixir, time to win. But that's not all the Ice Golem brings to the table. There's also his death damage. When the Ice Golem dies, it releases a Frost Nova that slows down and damages nearby troops. It's great for clearing out small swarm units like bats or skeletons, and combined with a small spell like Zap, it can take out minions and goblins. Now, sometimes the death damage doesn't hit anything at all, but when it does, it can turn the tide of a battle. Perhaps the most important role of the Ice Golem is its ability to be used as a kiting tool. It can pull dangerous troops away from your tower and into the range of your other defenses. It fits perfectly in fast cycle decks because it only costs 2 elixir and can do so many different jobs depending on the situation. Next up is the Barbarian Barrel. It's very similar to the log, but with some key differences. Instead of just damage and knockback, it also spawns a Barbarian at the end. Hence the name Barbarian Barrel. This makes it great for decks that want a little bit more defense or pressure after the roll. But what exactly sets it apart from the log? Well, the Barbarian Barrel doesn't have as wide of a hitbox as the log, and it doesn't knock back enemies at all, but the Barbarian it spawns is tough enough to tank a little bit of damage and fight back. Especially in decks like Splash Yard where you want a guaranteed tank for your graveyard. It is especially good against stuff like archers, considering log can't kill them. The roll damages them and the Barbarian can finish off the survivors. Despite the Barbarian having a more narrow hitbox, it is still solid against nearly all ground swarms. The only time it can be a bit of a nuisance is when your opponent keeps mixing things up with his Goblin Barrel placement. Overall, the Barbarian Barrel isn't just a log replacement, it brings its own strengths, especially when you want a bit of extra defense or pressure alongside your spell. And for 2 elixir, it is extremely versatile, being able to deal damage and spawn a troop. Now let's talk about bats. But before we do, I want to ask you if you could subscribe to the channel and maybe leave a like on the video. These videos take a lot of effort to make, and your support really does mean the world to me. I appreciate it. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So, bats. These tiny flying troops are super useful because they target air units, which many cheap troops can't do. And 5 bats together, yeah, they do a lot of damage. But they are fragile and get wiped out easily by spells like Zap or arrows. But if your opponent doesn't have a spell ready, bats can give you a huge positive elixir trade by shutting down a 5 elixir balloon or even ground units like a Valkyrie or Musketeer. You'll realize that with all the 2 elixir cards in this list, it's hard not to get a positive elixir trade. Bats aren't just good for defense though, you can also use them on offense, usually paired with the miner or behind another unit. They'll quickly chip away at a tower if left alone, but you have to be careful since they're easy to kill if your opponent has spells like Zap or Giant Snowball. Though what if they could survive those spells? That would surely be overpowered, right? Well, let me introduce you to Evolved Bats. The Evolved Bats heal each time they hit something, and they can heal over their actual max HP. This essentially turns them into minions, and you know what minions can do? Yep, they can survive spells like Zap and Giant Snowball, and what makes this even better is that a 2 elixir card like Bats can be cycled a lot more frequently, which means getting to its evolution is not a difficult task. Overall, their air targeting ability and high DPS make Bats a unique and important option for a lot of decks, especially in fast-paced decks that want to pressure and defend consistently. Now, I know this video is about 2 elixir cards being ridiculously good, but there's actually a bit of an odd one out, and that would be the Berserker. The Berserker is one of those cards that on paper sounds like it could be solid, but in practice, it struggles to find its place. At 2 elixir, you expect a card to either provide consistent value in defense or offense, or, better yet, both. The Berserker tries to fill a bit of a tanky melee role, but it falls short in several areas. First of all, its health is decent but not amazing. It can soak up some damage, but doesn't really outlast many common threats. Its attack speed and damage output are underwhelming for a card of its cost, it's slower than other 2 Elixir troops like Spear Goblins or Bats, and that means it's not great for a quick pressure onto someone's tower. Another issue is its niche synergy with the Rune Giant. While pairing Berserker and Rune Giant can work, it's a commitment that locks your deck into a specific playstyle, limiting flexibility. I mean, you're literally committing 2 out of 8 cards to a deck. This combo can put a lot of pressure on your opponent if executed well, but if you don't have the right cards or support, Berserker kinda feels like dead weight. Not only that, it also kinda defeats the purpose of Berserker only being 2 Elixir, because to unlock its true power, you have to use it with the Rune Giant, which is 4 Elixir. So you're now committing 6 Elixir to a defense or offense. Not quite worth it. Now, I would suggest just making it more playable on its own. They could give it a small splash damage attack similar to Valkyrie, or something like the Electro Wizard where it can hit 2 targets at once. I mean, it is wielding 2 axes after all. But lastly, what I think could go a long way is increasing its movement speed so it can be a more immediate threat. Any of those changes would help make the Berserker more viable, giving it some more defensive value or making it a proper threat on offense. Right now though, Berserker sits awkwardly between being a mini tank and a damage dealer, but doesn't really excel in either role. It's a card that might shine in very specific decks or with particular buffs, but is not a staple in the current meta. So, to stick to the topic of this video, let's talk about the Bomber. And this is where things get a little more exciting. For just 2 Elixir, Bomber delivers ranged splash damage, which is a rare and valuable combination at such a low cost. Its ability to hit ground swarms like Skeleton Army or Goblin Gang reliably makes it a great defensive card. But it can even counter a 5 Elixir card like Barbarians, and together with Ice Golem, it can even take out Elite Barbarians. What really sets Bomber apart is its survivability. The Bomber can stick around after being hit by a bunch of small spells. Even spells like Log or Earthquake don't take out the Bomber. This means that it can keep chipping away at enemies over time, which can completely change the tide of a push and give the Bomber some insane value. This staying power makes it a flexible option across many decks. It fits well in control decks that rely on managing swarm units, but it can also slot into beatdown or even bridge spam decks that need cheap splash support. It doesn't necessarily have a specific card synergy that defines it, but it complements almost any deck because dealing with swarms efficiently is always important. And a 2 Elixir Bomber isn't something people want to fireball nearly as much as a 5 Elixir Wizard. The Bomber's range and splash radius allow it to defend while staying just far enough away to avoid some damage itself. The balance between offense and defense combined with its low Elixir cost means that it almost always offers positive value in trades, but the normal Bomber is mainly a good choice for defense with some potential for a counter push. But the Evolved Bomber? Now that is unreal. Now, I won't go into detail of how extremely overpowered the original Evo Bomber was, but the current one isn't something to ignore either. With its bomb bouncing ability, it can deal a very good amount of damage to the enemy tower from your side of the arena. And against some decks like Mortar, he can even become a reliable way to deal damage to the enemy tower. And all that for just 2 Elixir. Then there is the Giant Snowball, a spell that often gets overlooked but deserves a lot more attention. It is a 2 Elixir spell with several unique features that differentiate it from the Log or Zap. The Giant Snowball does moderate damage, but more importantly, it knocks back and slows enemy troops, which adds a layer of control to your defense and offense. The knockback can disrupt pushes by moving units out of position, and that slow effect gives your towers and troops just a bit more time to deal damage. This is especially useful in decks that rely on cards like Goblin Drill and Graveyard, where positioning and timing are crucial. Unlike the Zap, the Giant Snowball doesn't reset tower targeting. This is a huge advantage when running Graveyard, because resetting tower aggro causes your skeletons to die faster, which is your main source of damage. Instead, Snowball helps you manage the battlefield by pushing away high-health support troops like Valkyrie or Knight, creating openings for your Goblin Drill or Miner to chip away safely. It's not just useful offensively. On defense, the Snowball can be a lifesaver against swarms and charging units like Battle Ram and Ram Rider. Not only that, but did you know that a Giant Snowball with good timing and placement can fully, and I mean fully, counter a Wizard and Musketeer? Its combination of knockback, damage, and slow effect makes it a versatile tool in many decks, especially those focused on control and chip damage. In short, the giant Snowball is a flexible spell that might not have the instant punch of Log or Zap, but makes up for it with utility that can swing a game when placed well. It shines most in control and graveyard decks, where every second and every positioning advantage counts, and with its evolved version, it becomes great in decks like Expo, as it can make units disappear completely for a short second. That allows your Expo to lock onto the tower.
And that's why we love this deck, man. Rolls all the way back. Ugh, yeah.
It also gets a bigger range due to that rolling ability. Snowball is a strong yet still pretty underrated 2 Elixir card, if you ask me. But no 2 Elixir card is as underrated as the Goblin Curse. This card is one of the more unusual 2 Elixir options in Clash Royale. It's definitely not a straightforward play it and forget it kind of spell. Instead, Goblin Curse rewards players who are creative and strategic with timing and combos. The curse deals a little bit of damage to troops and turns anything inside of its radius into your goblins. But a fun little quirk about it is that it has damage amplification.
Did you know that Goblin Curse has damage amplification?
Anyway, on its own it might feel gimmicky or situational because it doesn't immediately deal damage or control the board the way that Log or Zap do.
By the way, did you know Goblin Curse does damage amplification?
The real power of Goblin Curse comes when combined with other spells or cards. For example, pairing it with Rage allows things like skeletons, goblins, and even minions to instantly turn into goblins who are, now raged, by the way. This combo can quickly turn a minor pressure into a full-blown offensive threat that will nearly always catch your opponent off guard.
And, if you didn't know, Goblin Curse has damage amplifications.
The card also works well offensively when used with Miner, which can distract the tower while the cursed building or troops spawn goblins behind enemy lines. This kind of combo requires planning and prediction, making Goblin Curse less popular for casual players, but highly rewarding in skilled hands. Because it encourages some outside-of-the-box thinking and can lead to some unique pushes, Goblin Curse holds a niche but solid place in the meta. It might not be for every deck, but its presence forces the opponent to play differently, which can be a significant advantage. Definitely not a card to overlook. Moving on to Goblins, those classic 2 Elixir troops are reliable and versatile. While not flashy, they consistently provide good value. Unlike skeletons, Goblins survive spells like Zap and Snowball, which makes them a more durable option for defense or offense. Their high attack speed and very solid damage output allows Goblins to quickly chip away at tanks or distract heavy hitters like the Prince or Mini P.E.K.K.A. They also serve as a solid counter to Hog Riders and Royal Giants due to their numbers and quick damage. One of the reasons Goblins remain relevant despite being such a simple card is their flexibility. They are mostly defensive but can surprise on offense when left unchecked. For example, dropping Goblins behind a miner or a tank can force your opponent to either respond quickly or lose a lot of health. Not only are they tankier and stronger than skeletons, you also get 4 of them. That might seem like a small change, but that 4th Goblin is 25% of the DPS. They also have a faster movement speed than skeletons, so they definitely make up for that extra elixir cost. Ever since the number increased back in 2022, they went from underwhelming and too expensive to a seriously strong card that is used in a whole bunch of different decks. They don't usually carry games, but are definitely dependable units. Because they're a little more expensive than skeletons, they're usually chosen when you want a stronger, more resilient swarm. So, now that we mentioned Rage while talking about the Goblin Curse, let's talk about it for real. Rage itself is a spell that had its ups and downs in the meta, but remains a powerful tool in the right hands since its rework in 2022. It used to simply increase attack and movement speed, but ever since the rework, it's like a Zap that doesn't have a stun effect. Rage pairs especially well with troops and units that are fast already, like Ram Rider and of course, Elite Barbarians. It can delete a skeleton army while also boosting the attack and movement speed of your cards. Quite versatile. But it also has use cases with other cards. When you cast Rage on an evolved Goblin Giant, for example, the rate at which it spawns goblins accelerates, overwhelming opponents with sheer numbers before they can react. It's also been quite popular in Giant Prince decks recently, where it helps close the gap faster and increase DPS to break through defenses. Rage can transform an otherwise slow, plodding push into a deadly rush that forces your opponent into bad trades or mistakes. Think about Elixir Golem decks. They use this to the best of their ability. On the other hand, Rage requires careful timing and setup to maximize its value. If you use it too early or in the wrong spot, you risk wasting Elixir or giving your opponent an easy counter. Its effectiveness depends heavily on your deck composition and how well you can predict enemy responsiveness. Despite this, Rage rewards skillful players who can combine it with the right troops and spells. When played correctly, it can be the difference between a stalled push and a game-winning attack. Now let's talk about the only ranged air-targeting 2 Elixir card in the entire game, that being the Spear Goblins. These guys are quietly one of the most versatile 2 Elixir cards in the game. They don't just stand out with raw power or tankiness, but their value lies in their utility and flexibility. For just 2 Elixir, you get a ranged unit that targets both air and ground, which automatically gives them an edge over many low-cost options like skeletons or goblins that only target ground. Their range means they can chip away safely behind tanks or chip damage on towers from a distance, making them a great choice for bait or cycle decks. Now, bats can also target air and actually deal more damage, but they don't have any range. Bats are also in the air, which means they can't stop a charging prince or an incoming mini P.E.K.K.A. Spear Goblins, on the other hand, have the advantage of ground movement, allowing them to distract and stall those cards while being able to deal a bit of damage from a distance. They're often overlooked because they don't shine in a single flashy role, but their ability to force your opponent to respond keeps them relevant. Their low elixir cost and decent damage also make them perfect for quick, efficient defense. With the help of your tower, they can take down cards like Inferno Dragon, Knight, or Mini P.E.K.K.A., buying you precious seconds to stabilize. Because of this, Spear Goblins are commonplace in cycle decks that prioritize fast rotations and chip damage. Their role is simple: poke, distract, and delay, and while they might not carry a game alone, they definitely contribute quietly but steadily over the course of a match. Now, moving on to Suspicious Bush. This card is one of the more unique and less conventional 2 Elixir options in Clash Royale. It doesn't fit the traditional mold of troops or spells, and its slow movement speed combined with its camouflage mechanic makes it a tricky card to evaluate. The Suspicious Bush is invisible to troops until it pops out of the bush, which happens either when it gets attacked by a spell or when it reaches a building. This invisibility means that it can sometimes sneak past defenses, making it a slow but still serious threat. The downside? Well, as I just said earlier, it is really slow. Because of this low movement speed, opponents are given more than enough time to react and counter it. This can make it feel like an underwhelming or inconsistent card in many matchups. However, if it had a slight buff to its movement speed, I believe it could shift from being a niche card to a serious pressure tool, similar to wall breakers. But they're not just for offense. Considering they will only come out of their hiding spot when taking damage, they can be used to defend a skeleton barrel when timed right, and that's not all they can defend. Like I said, the Suspicious Bush will also pop out of its bush when it reaches a building, and the Goblin Drill is also a building. The goblins will nearly instantly hop out of the bush and deal serious damage to the drill itself. They take down the drill and then one-shot the goblins. In the right hands, and with a bit of luck, Suspicious Bush can bait out spells or cause your opponent to mismanage Elixir, which is a win in and of itself. Considering you need to either use a spell or a building to defend them, they usually give you a positive Elixir trade. Right now, Suspicious Bush kinda sits on the edge. Not quite meta, but not quite useless either. A small buff could make it a meta shaper, and its uniqueness means it can throw off opponents who aren't used to playing against it. I've seen people miss log many times on the bush because of its awkward timing. Speaking of the log, let's talk about, well, the log. Arguably one of the most reliable and universally useful 2 Elixir cards Clash Royale has ever seen. It is simple in concept, but incredibly powerful in practice, and for years now it's been a core of the game's identity. The log brings a few key effects in one smooth roll. It deals damage to all ground units in its path, pushes them back, and also chips away at the enemy tower. Each of these effects on its own might not be worth a full card slot, but together they create a tool that offers control, chip damage, and disruption, all for just 2 Elixir. The knockback effect is what really sets the log apart. It doesn't just deal damage, it disrupts. It can stop a charging prince in its tracks, knock back a battle ram before it connects, or push a goblin gang off your miner just long enough for the tower to finish the job. That delay and displacement can completely change the outcome of a trade. Without the knockback, the log would just be another spell, but with it, it becomes a precise tool for controlling tempo and denying value. The damage it deals is also perfectly tuned. It wipes out Skeleton Army, Goblin Gang, Dark Goblin, Princess, and with the help of a tower, it can take out firecrackers, bombers, and archers as well. And because it travels along the ground in a line, you can clear multiple troops at once while also chipping the tower. That tower damage adds up too. In long games or control matchups, consistent log chip can be the difference between a win and a loss. Now, people often compare it to the Barbarian Barrel since they're both 2 elixir ground spells with similar use cases, but while Barrel gives you a mini tank with the spawn Barbarian, the log trades that for extra damage, solid knockback, and guaranteed tower chip. That makes it more consistent in matchups where you need to hit more spread out units or reliably clear low health troops from a safer distance. In that way, the log is less about tanking and more about control and consistency. It's not flashy, but it will always do its job. There's also the fact that the log is incredibly safe to play. It is rarely wasted. You can cycle it on a tower for chip, use it on defense for swarm control, or deny a bridge push with perfect timing. In cycle decks especially, where every card needs to be low commitment and high efficiency, the log fits like a glove. What makes the log even more impressive is its longevity. Through countless balance changes and meta shifts, it has remained one of the most picked and trusted cards in the entire game. You'll find it in Minor Control, Motorcycle, Royal Giant, Expo, Hog, Drill, you name it. Its flexibility allows it to be dropped into almost any archetype and still provide value. And because it is so widely used, it actually influences how other cards are balanced. Cards like Princess or Dark Goblin always have to be strong enough to justify their risk, because everyone is running the log. It shapes the meta just by existing, and that's not something you can say about all 2 elixir cards. I mean, did you know they added log for the sole purpose of countering the Princess for a positive elixir trade? In short, the log is not just a good spell. It is a defining part of Clash Royale's identity. It's reliable, safe, and always relevant. Whether you're facing off against swarms, bridge spam, or control decks, the log always gives you a consistent answer. It doesn't need a fancy evolution or a flashy mechanic. Its strength comes from doing a lot of things right all at once. And in a game as fast and punishing as Clash Royale, that is more than enough to make it one of the best 2 elixir cards in the game, period. Wall Breakers. Wall Breakers have always been an interesting card in the 2 elixir slot because they combine both offensive pressure and tactical distraction. On paper, they seem fragile, tiny little units that explode on death, but their speed and the threat they pose force opponents into quick and sometimes imperfect responses, which is where their real value lies. They aren't usually a win condition by themselves, but they're excellent at pressuring your opponent's elixir and forcing mistakes. When your opponent overcommits to defending a push, a well-timed wall breaker rush can punish them hard, especially if they misplace a spell or don't have the right counters ready. In fast cycle decks, wall breakers shine by helping keep the pressure constant. Their quick elixir cost lets you cycle through your deck rapidly, and when paired with cards like Miner or Goblin Drill, they can create strong multi-pronged attacks that are hard to stop. The evolution of wall breakers actually adds a whole new layer of threat. Instead of just one explosion, the evolved version gives them a second life in a way, meaning that they can finish off swarms or heavily damaged group troops with that first explosion. This changes them from just a nuisance into a legitimate source of damage, especially if they catch grouped up units or clumped up defenses by surprise. This evolution also means that wall breakers can serve a defensive purpose, cleaning up swarm units that threaten your towers, adding versatility to what was once a mostly offensive card. However, because they still die quickly, timing and placement remained critical. You can't just throw them out and hope for the best. What's most important to understand about wall breakers is how their speed influences the flow of the match. Fast-moving, low-cost units that can sneak in and force a reaction always have value. And with that evolution, their value has only grown, making wall breakers a solid pick in many aggressive or cycle-based decks. I've brought it up a bunch in this video, so let's finally talk about Zap, a card that has been a quiet MVP in Clash Royale for years. At just 2 elixir, it offers a unique mix of utility: small area damage, a brief stun, and a fast cast time. On paper, it might seem simple, but Zap's true strength lies in its ability to reset and interrupt, 2 mechanics that are far more important than they first appear. Zap is one of the few spells in the game that can stop a charging prince or battle ram mid-animation, canceling their most threatening attack with a single tap. That alone makes it worth its cost, but it goes further. The brief stun effect also resets Sparky, Inferno Tower, and Inferno Dragon. These cards scale in damage over time, so hitting them with a zap at the right moment completely neutralizes their threat and buys your troops just enough time to survive and take them down. Especially in a beatdown deck where a reset can keep your win condition alive, that tiny moment of delay is everything. One of Zap's most underrated traits is how fast it activates. Unlike Snowball or Arrows, which have a travel time after deploying, Zap is instant. You can cast it and immediately get value, which matters when the timing is razor thin, like zapping bats as they attack your Hog Rider or resetting a locked-on Inferno Tower just before it melts your giant. That speed makes Zap feel snappy and reliable, and when played correctly, it can be the difference between a successful push and a failed one. And that's before we even talk about the evolution. Evolved Zap takes everything that made the original spell great and dials it up. You get more damage, a wider area of effect, and more importantly, 2 stuns instead of 1. That might sound small, but it has a huge impact on how forgiving the card is. Normally, using a single zap means you need perfect timing. Wait too long or zap too early and the Inferno Dragon still cooks your balloon, but with your Evolved Zap, you get a second chance built in. It is far more forgiving, and that flexibility allows for plays that simply aren't possible with the standard version. The added damage and larger radius also help clean up swarms more effectively. Bats, skeletons, and goblins are no problem, and now you can even clip multiple troops more reliably than before. This makes the Evolved Zap especially deadly in control or bridge spam decks where fast, precise spell usage is key. Even without the evolution though, Zap still has a very defined role. Compared to the Log, which clears ground swarms and chips the tower, or Snowball, which slows and knocks back troops, Zap is the only cheap spell that targets both air and ground while also offering a stun. Zap isn't trying to outclass the Log or Snowball. It's simply doing a job that neither of them can. And on top of that, it pairs incredibly well with other low-cost cards. Decks that run Wall Breakers, Miner, or Goblins often rely on Zap to remove whatever cheap units the opponent uses to counter them. That kind of synergy where a small spell unlocks the full potential of a low-cost push is what makes Zap so valuable. It doesn't just clear troops, it clears the way for your win condition to connect. At a competitive level where every elixir counts and every half second matters, Zap remains a high-skill, high-reward card. It requires knowledge of timing, cycle management, and opponent prediction, and it rewards players who know how to squeeze out every last bit of value from their elixir. And while it might not be as flashy or meta-defining as it once was, the evolved version has absolutely brought Zap back into the limelight. With better coverage, bigger damage, and that clutch double reset mechanic, Zap now fits naturally into many modern decks that demand tight control over the battlefield. Ultimately, Zap is a perfect example of what a 2 elixir card can offer. It doesn't carry your push on its own, but it makes everything around it more dangerous. It's not just about the stun or the damage, it's about the tempo, control, and synergy. And that's why after all of these years, Zap still holds a spot as one of the most impactful small spells in the game. But one card that has been increasingly impactful throughout the entire history of Clash Royale is the Cannon. Its history is nothing short of extraordinary. We talk about it full length in this video here, so I'll see you there.